Well, it actually is great to have you guys along, Scotty, and we have been talking about this for a long time.
We have.
And Keith, great to catch up and have a little bit of a chat about the viticultural industry as we see it now. Scotty, R&D, new farm. How long have you been doing that for?
This is year 14.
Year 14.
With New Farm, my 20th year in agriculture.
Is that right? Yeah.
Including broadacre. So, in the last couple of years, probably 10 to 12 years, has been very heavily focused on viticulture.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my pet little crop that I work in.
I'm only in the Mugford River region.
Mugford River, Franklin, Pemberton, a range of different locations. A bit in Swan Valley as well.
So really, what you've done for New Farm is worked on a lot of their new products and.
Yeah, that's my job.
Help bring them to the market.
My job is to develop them, establish labels, help with registration, but also look at that extension piece where we figure out how the products work for a grower, how they're going to lay out into a program, and then help growers implement those along with some of the other chemistry they've already got for good disease management or even for weed management, insect management.
Yeah, great. And Keith, we go back a long way.
Oh yes, too long to think about.
Too long, yes. Yeah, it was the late 70s when you actually breached the border and came into WA?
In fact, similar to Scott in many ways, but this is my 40th year in WA. So
you're nearly a local.
I reckon I've nearly become a local.
And you basically came over and worked at Mosswood for Bill Panel and,
that's correct.
And the family, yeah.
So I joined, actually my first vintage for the panels was 1979, so that was where it started. And so previously, like Scott again, came from tertiary study in South Australia. So I went to Roseworthy College there, graduated in viticulture and enology. So I came to work for the panels, and then in 1984, my wife Claire and I took over at Mosswood. So we actually bought it from the panels in 1985. So
and been making great wines ever since.
Well, we're doing our best.
Yeah. And we do have a 99 up on the
Yeah, I see that.
up behind you there, so we might have to drink that a bit later on.
I think that's a splendid idea. Yeah.
Outstanding on the ballot today.
Yeah, Scotty, I remember Keith playing cricket. I think he played cricket for Yobs, Yelling Old Buds in the Busselton Margaret River League. And
playing in Michigan, you were out.
That's right,
yeah, that's right.
rolled a few bounces down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, just want to have a quick chat, but before we do, Keith, Deb and I were up at Dirk-Ardagh Island just recently, and Tori and Karen asked me to give you and Claire
thank you very much.
Very one
nice.
of these each.
Yeah.
I think Claire gets the small one and you get the big one.
Yeah,
okay?
I don't think that'll go over my tummy. The small one.
So Karen and Tori up at Dirk-Ardagh Island say thank you very much for setting the Mosswood wines up for their long lunch at Dirk-Ardagh Homestead. So it was quite interesting, Keith. We sat down and chatted with Bernie. Bernie Zara at the local New Farm some weeks ago, and we spoke about Du-Wett, and it's quite interesting when we have a look at Du-Wett, and I remember going right back to Jörg Kitt, who worked with New Farm. I'm not sure whether, does Jörg still work with New Farm?
No, he's a private consultant now in South Australia.
Okay, but Jörg came and introduced Du-Wett to us quite a few years ago, and I'm thinking probably around about 15 years ago. Would that be right?
Yeah, I reckon probably. It's at least 10. Yeah, definitely.
At least 10 years ago, we got the local croplands, the croplands reps up the road here. We took one of their sprayers out to your place, and we did a little bit of spraying with Du-Wett. And
the idea was that it meant that the topical treatments we were applying, like say wettable sulphur, were less prone to being washed off. So, this time of the year in our region, it gets a bit wet, and respraying is always an issue. How much rain is a wash off, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Du-Wett originally for us was interesting because it was going to reduce the problems associated with that. And then when I went to that function, and Jörg was actually explaining the other benefit of it, which of course is the improved efficiency you get with the better distribution of the chemical on leaves and bunches. And so that you're talking about seeing the chemical actually at work behind the sprayer. And I didn't actually believe the footage that Jörg had shown in his presentation, but when I walked behind the machine, I could see that it was doing exactly what he said, which is distributing the chemical at that particular stage right across the leaf surface. So that was a real eye-opener, and I didn't understand at that point that, I think this is right, Scott, I mean, you may be able to confirm this, but we were thinking of it just as a sticker, basically, whereas Jörg's advice at that presentation was use it for not just wet part of the season, but the whole season, so that you got just better, literally better application of the chemical.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's not so much about the sticking component, it's about spreading and coverage.
Yep.
Which is why you see such great responses from use with topical applications.
Yep.
You know, so sulphur rates can modify because your coverage is enhanced by that extra spread across the surface area. I always think of it more as a water replacement than anything else.
So tell us a bit about Du-Wett, Scotty.
So Du-Wett's an organosilicate.
It sits in the adjuvant family?
Yeah, it's an organosilicate, so it's a slightly separate family to a lot of the other the adjuvants that we use. It's designed as a super spreader, so it takes all the surface tension out of the water droplets. So when you have droplets hitting a surface, they're all impacted droplets. None of them bounce, and a lot of the water droplets sometimes actually hit, bounce off, reject, and so this is maximum coverage and spread across the surface. It was designed out of New Zealand. There are other organosilicates in this family, obviously, in the marketplace, but this was designed to spread without causing flooding of the stomata. And that's where things like pulse, penetrant options give you more penetration into the plant. So this is a nice blend between spreading across the surface without penetration, and as a result we don't get phytotoxicity effects, so it's very safe. So it's been used quite widely with all sorts of different chemical options, very successfully.
Yeah, good. So Keith, you've obviously been using it for probably the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It's just at around about $60 a litre, I think, when you do the cold hard effects.
Yep.
When you go and buy a drum, tell us the benefits that you seem by using the product.
I mean, so Scott was just explaining, so he just described it as a water replacement. So in real terms for us, we used to spray, minimum at 250 litres per hectare of water per hectare with our applications. That was at this time of the year. Moving through to typically 1,000 litres per hectare at full canopy. And this, bearing in mind too, is in a canopy which is not that dense, so almost exclusively vertical shoot positioning, either in the Scott Henry system or similar. So leaf density or canopy density is basically 1 or 2 leaf thickness. So 1,000 litres a hectare into that canopy, there's a lot going through it and a lot dripping on the ground. So with this product, we now basically go to a maximum of 200 litres a hectare, and that was actually on the original advice from Jörg, which was don't spray beyond runoff. You're literally wasting your chemical. And I liked the logic. I could see what he was talking about, and so we introduced it originally then for 1 full season, and that was the intention. And it was really, we didn't fuss about the cost. We just thought this brings significant benefits. We'll give it a go and see if it works. And found that it did. And so then, since then, we've used it every year in every spray. And, once or twice, we've gone back over and looked at the economics of it. And essentially, where to begin. In a nutshell, instead of spraying 150,000 litres of water over, 23 hectares, we spray about 30,000.
Oh, yeah, big saving.
And so, that's the water component. And then, think of the tractor time,
Yeah, and that's one thing that gets missed a lot. It's the efficiency of the system. Because you concentrate spraying at 2x or 3x concentrate water volumes, you can get across twice as much or 3 times as much area with the same tank, giving perfect coverage all the way. Yeah. And it's that time where you don't have to do the extra 2 or 3 refills.
Yep.
You're actually spraying instead of sitting there with the tank, getting more water putting into it. So that efficiency is really something that people miss quite often with the product. It's not just coverage, it's the efficiency.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like if you think of our 23 hectares again, we're looking at saving roughly 60 hours of spraying time. So, what do you value your tractor and driver at? $100 an hour? Just think about that. very significant saving in that alone. And of course, you know, that wonderful idea of opportunity cost. So if your operator has got 60 hours that he's not sitting in the tractor, excuse me, that person, I beg your pardon, gentlemen, we'll stick to the gender non-specific issues here. So that person, instead of sitting in a tractor for 60 hours, is doing some other work around the property. So that opportunity cost isn't factored into what we're talking about. So you've got the efficiency gain. You've also got the improved application. So to put some numbers into that for you, so Scott explained that the chemical is distributed effectively right across the surface of whatever it is that you're treating. And so we've reduced our wettable sulphur application rate from 5 litres a hectare at full canopy back to 2. And, you know, that's the scale of the reduction. Of course, wettable sulphur is not a particularly expensive chemical, but it's a saving. So spraying copper sulphate, Tribase Blue or similar, same thing. You know, the maximum rate we use of that is 2 litres per hectare. And it's really interesting to think about how we developed our lower rates. So this is this is a bit of bucket chemistry, right? But watching a machine spray 1,000 litres a hectare onto our vineyard, you could see vast amounts were just going off in the atmosphere. So that's the amount that didn't hit a leaf or bunch on the way out and it just disappeared. And then the leaves and bunches that were being hit were just being coated, and then the chemical was just dripping off and landing on the ground. So it's not going to work down there. So we've tried to estimate, well, okay, how much back in the day at 5 kilos a hectare was actually staying on the plant. And we thought, well, at least half of it's run off. So therefore we reduced our rates to 4, then 3, and then finally back to 2 kilos a hectare. And if you came and saw our property after a spray and saw the topical application of, say, wettable sulphur once more, you'd be surprised. Like you can see it there. So the careful application of the chemical is a further bonus in all this. And, you know, and then the final thing, you know, if you want to talk about this, is the sticking effect. You know, the wash off. So is there I'm not sure. Do you work on a minimum rainfall event for a wash-off, Scott?
So something like microthiol is the classic. So we always say that that's basically okay up to about 25 mil of rainfall.
Right.
But yeah, rule of thumb in the industry.
Without an adjuvant.
Without an adjuvant as a standard. But that's a high-grade sulphur product. Some of the other sulphurs don't have the same sort of spreading or the fine particle size curve, and that's a key part of it. But the old rule of thumb was always sort of 5 mil of rain equals 1 day. And that's sort of about right. If you've got 5 mils of rain, you're going to cut back down your time between sprays. The key part is to make sure with all those products you're getting good coverage, and retention is a key part of that as well. So if we can spread and retain it through rainfall events, then you're in a much better position to control disease.
So how have you found it, Keith, as far as rain events?
Well, basically, we found it really effective at resisting significant rainfall. Although so our old-fashioned wash-off was a 5 millimetre event. So every time we had a 5 mil event, we'd go back to day 0 on the program and start again. So you know, it didn't matter if we put out a full program the day before the rain event. As soon as the rain event finished, we'd go back to 0 and start again. And so, you know, we would have always at least one wash-off per season, you know, sometimes more. So with Du-Wett...
But that's pretty good for the reseller, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
You've got to think of the reseller.
Yeah, absolutely. But
we always forget the reseller.
We never forget the reseller. But the value for us then, of course, was that effectively we miss out on that runoff problem, or wash-off problem, excuse me. So, you know, if you build that into, you know, a bit of modelling for the cost, you know, you on our 23 hectares have one rain event that washes off a treatment, and you basically paid for the equivalent of all of a year's worth of Du-Wett. You know, we would run roughly 11, I say, somewhere between 10 and 12 sprays per year, depending on the season. So each variety is going to have roughly 8, 9 applications. So 12 in total. You only have to have one runoff, and Du-Wett in each of those sprays has been paid for. So
The other part of that is that if you do have a rainfall event that requires a reapplication, then you've got efficiency anyway, so you can get across the property within a short space of time without having that extra fill up that you have to continually do if you're doing a dilute without the Du-Wett.
yeah.
So there's that part of it too, and particularly for organic producers that's key because they don't have a lot of alternative options outside of sulphur. So these are the sort of products that they can potentially select.
Yeah,
Not necessarily organic, but for people who are running sulphur-based programs.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the instructions, it comes out as a rate per hectare, not a rate per 100 litres. Scotty, do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
It's kind of a unique one, that one. You need to take into consideration what products you're putting into the crop. Okay, so some products can antagonise the Du-Wett spread. So you need to look at per hectare volume that you're going to be putting out of things like microthiol or tri-base or those sort of products, and make sure that you don't exceed a certain level. So we just stick with a per hectare rate, and we look at our per hectare water volume. So what you're doing per hectare dictates what you're going to be doing with the adjuvant.
Yeah. And there's a reasonable rate, early season, late season?
Yes, it is. It's more to do with your target.
Okay, yeah.
So leaf material is really easy to hit. So using a lower dose rate is going to give you very good control, very good coverage. Bunches are much harder to wet because they're circular surfaces. There's a lot more hiding places where you can't get access to. So we usually go up with harder to wet targets with our dose rate of Du-Wett, and we keep it lower when we're just dealing with foliage. So you don't get as much runoff.
Yeah. Du-Wett with a product like Botector, your new biological?
Yeah, that's fine. We did lots of work with Du-Wett and Botector. Again, with Botector, it's more about spores and contact, much like it is with sulphur and copper for disease control. So if you're tempted to go too high with your water volume and you haven't brought your water volume down low enough and you're using Du-Wett, you'll get more runoff and you'll get more spores in the ground, just like we discussed before. So the key to it is make sure you get your dilute water volume right and then concentrate up, and then Botector will perform exceptionally well with it. It's kind of a nice little marriage between those two products because you are wanting the spores to go as far as they can around the berries during pre-bunch closure or even through into veraison to get that coverage. So Du-Wett works well with that.
Yeah. And you've also got a product called Designer, which sort of sits there with Du-Wett, but used when there's going to be some reasonably extreme weather events.
Yeah, Designer's sort of, it's a slightly different product. It has a latex component to it. It's a very similar sort of organosilicate. So it's designed very much for spreading, but more the sticking component we talked about before. So really sticks it on with a latex cover over the top of it, makes it a lot more rain fast. So that's not something we tend to use a lot anymore through most of the growing season. It's twice as much volume of product than what Du-Wett is, but it has its fit for specific situations.
Yeah.
We've used it a couple of times, in anticipation of really significant rain, but it's a guessing game.
It is. We've seen it used in a lot of vineyards in Margaret River, and particularly to the north, where there's those storms that come through in the early spring. Most people I've seen have used it in the front half of the program and then swapped to Du-Wett for the rest.
Okay,
Yeah, makes sense.
More spreading capability.
Yeah.
And there's some clean down advantages as well.
Yeah, good. So Keith, your typical spray program across the season.
So,
you don't have to go product by product, but
pretty straightforward. I mean, and this is, driven by, the changes that happen, every year. So products come in and out of the dog book. So we're alert to, product changes there, and then there are new products coming in. So we've got Botector, for example, becoming available this year, and we'll certainly use that in botrytis control. But essentially, our program is along these lines. So up until flowering, we will use, say, microthiol and tri-base blue on a fortnightly rotation. And then once we get into flowering, then because we're concerned about the botrytis control, so we go to the systemics. So, you know, we're still using the traditional too, so azoxystrobin, chlorothalonil, so, you know, the product names elude me just at the moment, but so each one of those...
Barrick,
that's right.
chlorothalonil, yep.
And they've become a little bit easier to use. Azoxystrobin, the withholding period's changed, Scott. It's now... used to be really difficult for a variety like Sauvignon Blanc, which is picked, say, 80 days after flowering. It was always marginal, you know, with respect to the withholding period. Nowadays, it's no longer a problem. So anyway, the 2 systemic applications through that period for the 2 major fungi plus botrytis. Then we go back to microthiol, Tribase Blue plus switch to close, you know, as we're approaching bunch closure as best as we can estimate. And then depending on the variety, we will go at least one or two more Tribase microthiol sprays, continuing to use Du-Wett all the way through. Till we get to 60 days out from harvest. And I know that, say, microthiol is 30 days pre-harvest, but so this is not a regulatory issue, but it's a Mosswood issue. So we don't like we don't want the risk of any residual sulphur sitting on the skins. So we stop at 60 days out with microthiol. We go on to one of the, what are they, Scott? Remind me, are they Group 3s now, or, you know, DMIs? They're Group 3s, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, you know, we've tried a range of those. So we'll apply a DMI. They've got a 30-day typically withholding period. So we go to microthiol, excuse me, I'll try that again. We'll go with you know, one of the DMIs plus, because of the copper problem with DMIs, we go with zinc. So we'll put out you know, a zinc spray at that point, and that finishes it. So if everything goes according to plan, that's the rotation we go through.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, we chop it and change it. So for example, with Botector coming on board, we haven't really had a defence against botrytis post switch. So you know, now we've got a very handy product there that we'll definitely be using that this year, for example. So you know, that's another one we'll probably add into the list. And I mean, so I always make the point that's where we are at the moment. So as the knowledge on these things changes and, you know, new products come through, then we're also happy to change what we're doing. So, but you know, if we use a product like Du-Wett, I mean, basically it's delightfully routine. You know, what's today, Monday? It's a spray day. You know, and it'll be a spray day in 2 weeks' time. You know, assuming that the weather event doesn't come on a Monday. You know, we'll delay for a couple of days, then on we'll go again. But it has made that whole thing wonderfully routine. So, and also I have to say, much less of a drain too on the operators. Like you were talking about wasting your time filling a tank or driving a tractor back to fill a tank. You know, the transit time, because we've got 2 vineyards that are about 1.5 kilometres apart.
Yeah, right.
So, but the spray station is at one location only. So the tractor finishes its spray and then it drives 1.5 kilometres back, you know, and of course it's through vineyard country, so it's not at 35 kilometres an hour. No. So, you know, the driver wanders back and then parks it and then refills it and then off he back the, you know, a couple of k's. So just cutting out all that, you know, that driving. And even tank fill time, you know, like if you're only spraying at 200 litres a hectare, or even 100 litres a hectare when you've got a smaller target, instead of having to spray, you know, 2,000 litres onto your, you know, you put out 600 or something like that. You know, there's even, I mean, I know it seems odd, but even filling the tank, or refilling the spray tank, you have the reduction in that time as well.
Oh, yeah. It's all dead time.
You know,
the more you can take that dead time out of your program, the better off you are.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's hilarious. You do the numbers. It's 60 hours less time spent doing that stuff on 23 hectares. 60 hours. You know,
that's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
Well and truly,
you know, so,
and you factor in the weather conditions that we get down through Margaret River, Gwerup area, and how variable that can be over the course of a day. Yeah, dead time there where you're not getting good coverage anyway because the wind's way up and everything's disappearing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So efficiency is really important.
Yeah. And and of course, how you value that's the complicated one. But if you put it in at around $100 an hour, roughly for tractor operation and the driver and the operation of your fungicide unit, $100 an hour, it's probably about right. It's pretty valuable. So, don't waste it. That's my view.
Yeah, well and truly.
Yeah.
Scotty, Du-Wett, do you use Du-Wett in some of your trials or most of your trials, or?
We don't use it in most of our trial work because majority of our work for registration purposes has to be done at dilute. That's sort of the convention within the industry. So most of our product options that we develop through to commercial release will have probably 1 year where they come back in and we look at it in concentrate systems and how they mix and match so that we've got some more practical information. So we always tick the box for the regulator first and then we come back to what's practical for the grower. It's interesting talking to Keith about the sulphur dose rates because we actually, the last couple of weeks, been doing a few meetings around the area here talking about sulphur as part of the conversation and water volume dose rate versus concentrate versus with and without Du-Wett. And it's exactly as he's saying, the lower dose rate really just only doesn't work to the level that the growers are requiring because they're not getting the coverage that they need with the product. If you add Du-Wett to the tank, you actually get this huge improvement in efficacy. So there's lots of that work that goes on. We always come back to it with each individual product that we're bringing to market to make sure that we understand how it's going to work for people who are using these sort of products.
I think back in the good old days, with this is pre-recycling spray units and and also we were certainly, let me say, guilty of this, that in our windy region here with air blast spraying, we were determined to see reasonably big droplets making their way out into the wind and landing on the canopy, and it was actually reassuring if you could see it dripping off, as in then you knew it was getting there. But looking back on it, it was, well, old-fashioned, I suppose it is now, but that's why we had that mindset, right? At least get the chemical there so that you're getting some sort of coverage. But nowadays, even with it, like we have used Du-Wett with both air blast application and recycling spraying application. So we've used them in both, and we used it in both. And once even in the air blast application, the result was spot on. It's even better when we use it in the recycling environment, because basically, you're not wasting it. In addition to the savings, you're not wasting it. And then the other thing is that with the two towers operating opposite each other, you're getting the chemical right into the leaf zone at the beginning and then the bunch zone later on.
So what sort of spray rig are you using now?
So we've got a Litco with 2,000 litre tank, and so that comes through Clemens. So it's a Clemens supply unit. Look, the technology is really good. So I'm not sure if you've done any work on varying concentration of the active ingredient in the tank.
That's a hard one to do.
Yeah,
we haven't done a lot of work with it, particularly around recycled sprays. That's an important part, but we haven't got around to that yet.
As far as when we researched this, the two things that concerned us were how does the machine keep all the rubbish that collects? Like these things collect snails, what else?
Garden weevils.
Oh, garden weevils. It's hilarious what actually comes off and lands on the machine. So how they get that out. But the other thing that worried us was if you think about this, so you recycle, you're spending a lot of time sending stuff in and out of the tank, depending on what time of the year it is. So, for example, at this time of the year, most of the chemicals are actually going back into the tank, so it's circulating. So the concern for us was the rate of evaporation of water compared to the active constituent, and whether or not we were getting, we mix up our tank to be spraying at, say, I don't know, a kilo per hectare of sulphur or, something else. What it will be at the end of the run, if it's still at the right concentration. As best as we could tell, you know, any literature I could find on it, Scott anyway, said that the variations were only small. So we thought, all right, we'll give it a go. So yeah, that does appear to be the case, and certainly, you know, the saving in terms of volume with the early sprays is huge, like 80% or something. It's massive. We did try to be really clever with that and work out our tank volume and so on more carefully, and then we decided, no, we're trying to fine tune it. It's not that simple. So instead, when we prepare a run at the moment, we'll do, you know, if we're spraying, you know, a litre a hectare on I don't know, whatever we're spraying, say 5 hectares. Sorry, let me rephrase that. 100 litres a hectare on 5 hectares. Then we'll make up, say, a 400 litre batch on the assumption that we're going to get around it comfortably, and there may be a bit left in the tank at the end. And that's usually what happens. And of course, you go from that to the end of the season doing virtually no recycling. You just, you know, spraying it at full canopy, and it all hits and stops. So yeah, the technology is good. The machines themselves are proving problematic.
In terms of
their reliability.
Right. And getting parts.
Parts, yeah. You know, technically in the modern world with the internet, part purchasing should be pretty straightforward. But, you know, it isn't. And then I wonder too. So if you think about the practical operation of these machines in a small vineyard environment like ours, so you know, headlands are tight. Operators have got to be careful, which means that, you know, there is a tendency to drag these things and hit strainer posts and stuff like that.
2018 vintage in the barrels. How's it looking?
Oh, sensational, Neil.
Is that right? Of course.
No, it was good year. It was a really good year. Yeah. The quality across the board was excellent. So whites and reds.
Yes.
And altogether, you know, one of the better growing seasons we've had. So, no, we have no complaints at all. Not sure really. Our yields were good, but not as good as we were expecting. You know, bunch weights were a little bit lighter than we thought they might be, and you know, when we went back and looked at the weather record, that, you know, things have been a bit damp in a couple of places, which probably dealt with, you know, some of that. And then we did get a bit of hail at some point, so we obviously lost a little bit there too. So what looked like probably a record crop turned out to be an average crop, but that's okay. You know, no complaint about that.
Yeah, good.
Most importantly, the quality was great.
Yeah, great.
Good ripeness, good flavour ripeness as well. Yep.
Any whites hitting the market shortly?
2018 Semillon will be on the road soon.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
And so the first of them will be out.
Yeah.
You know, in the next sort of 8 weeks or so.
Yeah.
Depending on, you know, when the proprietors can get themselves organised.
Yeah, organised. Yeah. And the 2015 Cabernet was released only a few months ago.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. So 15 was a terrific year for the region. Really, also a good year for both whites and reds. Yeah. Plagued by low crops. You know, that was well, not plagued. Disappointingly small crops, but we had a pretty ordinary flowering. You know, it wasn't difficult to see where the problem came from. And so we would like to have made more of it. But, you know, it is what it is.
And the release of the 15 was right in the back of the 2014 Cabernet, which sold pretty well for you.
That one caused a bit of a stir.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Ray Jordan. 99 points.
Yeah,
fantastic. That certainly made people taste it. And the response was great. And I mean, it was it was more than that. We just couldn't believe it. So and the 15 was a good follow-up. So the quality expectations were high. The wine matched it. So it was great. It was exciting. Fantastic. It reminded us of 30 years ago, Neil.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, truly, yes.
When the Margaret River region was really coming to the forefront, really, as a wine producing area. I mean, we're very establishment now, but we weren't then. And so it reminded me of the 1980s. You know, the demand and the interest. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, good. Good stuff, Scotty. You got any more to comment on Du-Wett that we may have missed out on?
No, I don't think so.
Compatibility
goes
with everything.
We've tried it with most things.
Yeah.
I guess the only caveat that I'd say is probably don't necessarily replace an adjuvant if it's there for a specific reason with it. A Movento would be a classic of that.
Yeah.
So use the products according to their labels and mixtures. But yeah, we've tried it with DMI chemistry, sulfur topical options, magnesium, coppers, a full gamut of options, and it works very effectively. Again, it comes back down to coverage and efficiency of use.
Okay,
So efficiency of time within the vineyard. So
when you actually put it in the tank, halfway through the mix or the start, or
I tend to put it later.
Later?
In the mix.
Yeah.
Fill up 3/4 and get your agitation going, and then add in your Du-Wett into the mix that way.
Yeah.
So just make sure everything's in the right mixing order when you're using it.
Yeah.
Same as normal vineyard practice.
Yeah. Good.
Pretty easy to use.
Simple.
Yeah.
And readily available.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's right.
From the very best outlets.
Well, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Keith. I think we should wind it up there. That's been a great half an hour sitting on the couch, and unfortunately it was in the morning. If it was sort of 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Keith, I reckon we would have
I think it's time
got one of those good Mosswood Reds out. But,
that's a good idea.
but we might have to leave that until a bit later. So,
No worries.
and it's quite interesting. This is sort of the first week of September, and the weather's been pretty wet. And I think the southwest of WA is one of the few wet areas in Australia at this point in time. Although
It is.
lower South Australia and Victoria is getting some rain. But what's your predictions for the coming year, Keith? You've been studying it since 1979.
Oh, the only prediction I've got, Neil, is that I can't say. Honestly, I have no idea. I mean, we've certainly, so the indications are we're going to have, well, we will certainly have an above average rainfall year. Like we're currently at about 920 millimetres at home, and that's on a property that's averaging 1,000 millimetres. So, we're definitely going to finish above that. And that's been typical of the last 5 or so years. We've had a run of higher rainfall years. And, the temperature, we monitor, we've got a computerised weather station, so we've got a swathe of temperature data that we can confuse ourselves with. But, the indications are, we're about slightly less than half a degree warmer than 2017.
Okay,
That would indicate that, we might be flowering slightly earlier than last year, and then therefore harvesting slightly earlier. There's a bit can happen in the meantime, but but which actually I quite like.
We'll be able to come to Dirk-Ardoch Island again next year.
Exactly, I can fit in the fishing trip, which is that is the fundamental thing here.
The most imperative part of the whole thing.
Absolutely, but generally speaking, my experience in the region has been that warmer is better. We've definitely made better vintages where we've had a bit more sunshine, a bit more warmth and less. So at the moment, the indications are we're probably going to be average or earlier in terms of harvest dates, but a lot can change. But so.
Very good.
So there you go. Did that
Good.
help?
Yeah, that.
Did you write that down? And we'd like to have that conversation.
Well, that's right.
It's recorded now. We're going to find out later.
3rd of May, we're leaving.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, Keith, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. And
worries, thank
Scotty,
you.
thanks for
No problem
your
at all.
time. I know you're a busy man. Well, we're all busy, I suppose. And made the journey down from Andrew. So, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Great.
Pleasure.
Our pleasure.
On you, mate.